Regular meeting of the Pitman Board of Education was advertised in the South Jersey Times, posted at Borough Hall, a copy thereof delivered to all Pitman schools to be posted and posted on the district's website. Further notice was posted and filed as required by law, saying the board will meet in closed session at 7 p.m. in Pitman High School Media Center. The President shall entertain any objections to the supporting reasons to the conduct of this meeting on the grounds that it violates the Open Public Meeting Act. Seeing none. Good evening. Welcome to this evening's Board of Education meeting. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Please join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'd like to welcome our new business administrator, Mr. Robert Miles. He's joining us for the first time this evening, so thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. If you could please call roll.
All right, roll call. Mrs. Bolton.
Here.
Mrs. Farrell.
Here.
Mr. Grossman.
Here.
Mrs. Higby Iono.
Here.
Mrs. Miller.
Here.
Mrs. Papalardo.
Here.
Mrs. Pote.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum, 7-0.
Thank you. And we have no presentations this evening.
We do not.
Great. I apologize, let me just flip back over to this guy. Okay. For the President's report, so we have a couple kind of laundry list items. We've obviously completed the superintendent evaluation, so that's done. I know that the workshop dates went out. Mr. Miles, I will get you the dates that we're attending, but our whole group will be attending in some capacity to workshops, so the group rate is usually best for us. We had the Gloucester County New Jersey School Board Association countywide dinner last week, does that sound right? And Mrs. Farrell was recognized, as was Mr. Grossman, for being certified new board members, and myself and Mrs. Papalardo for certified board members. So I really appreciate everyone's work, and I would encourage any members who have yet to attend a delegate assembly to take a peek. I believe the registration is still open. Mr. Grossman is our representative. He'll be attending in person. He is our voting delegate, but you can attend virtually and you do receive credit, and it oftentimes has pretty enlightening information. It's really helpful, I think, just to read through the agenda, even if you're not able to attend, because it gives you some idea about the conversations that are kind of swirling around throughout the state. From a legislative advocacy standpoint, the governor signed the most recent legislative action yesterday, and it will return 45% of the state aid to our district from the equalization aid that was cut this year. And they increased the tax levy capacity up to 9.9%. And additionally, they, in a different legislative action, are permitting districts like ours to have additional time from a budget planning perspective so that we're best able to make sure that we can make those adjustments with the aid that we're receiving. Trying to think. So what else? We have, we're going to want to partner with Mrs. Mazzola regarding her student project. I'm not sure what the availability looks like for that, but if everybody has responded back, was everyone able to attend that?
I think so. Everybody at some capacity said that they could help out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just let us know if there's anything we can do in advance, or if she
Okay.
needs anything other than her hands.
Yeah.
And we'll get it. And I think that's it. So I will turn it over to Mr. Crispin.
All right, just a few things to bring the board up to date on. We have our HIB report for the month as listed there as an attachment. Security drills as an attachment. The third item is HIB self-assessment grades for the 22-23 school year. This came in a little bit later, and Angela was out this week, so I didn't get it linked. For the board members, it is attached to all the documents that are part of the agenda. This is a document in which our administrators and working with our school safety specialists and our HIB specialists at each of the schools, they go through and rate how they're doing in the area of HIB in a number of different categories. Remember, this is from the 22-23 school year, so you'll see this for all 5 schools at that particular time. I think they did a pretty good job of really kind of being very honest. I mean, there's areas in there where we think we can do a better job. There's areas in which we do, I think, pretty well. You'll see it varies from school to school. If any members of the community, and I apologize, or those watching at home would like a copy, just send us an email and we will send that out so you get an opportunity to take a look at that.
And it's
Yeah.
posted on our website.
Okay,
already.
thank you again. Perfect, perfect. Hopefully on the website for anybody who wants to take a look at that. So again, it's just a self-assessment. It's us kind of indicating to the board how we feel we're doing in these areas, where we'd like to see some improvements, and hopefully we will continue to try to make that the best it can be. I'm not sure anybody else, referendum update? Does anybody else want to,
Mrs. Bolton?
we
Want
put
me to-
put Ms. Bolton in the spot here?
Yeah, I mean, you can go
We're
ahead.
just continuing to work through the process. We're wanting to dial in on the most specific numbers. This evening, we have a list of available projects. They're not necessarily the ultimate projects that we may move forward with. We have concerns. We just want to make sure that we are scrutinizing every recommendation and being good stewards of tax dollars, and that we're ensuring that we are getting the most bang for our buck as it pertains to the referendum items. We recognize that our facilities have outstanding needs, and we need to address them, but we want to, treat it like we would our own money and make sure that we are spending it wisely. So we're just continuing to gather some additional information. Mr. Miles is working with us to make sure that we have a really comprehensive understanding as to what the potential tax burden could be for when that goes up to vote.
Very good. And last two items, a ROD grant. A ROD grant we received from the state will enable us to do a project here at the high school for our HVAC system. We went through that process for those people that were at the public hearing in terms of awarding those bids, identifying the funding for that project. That will install a new system in the gymnasium, weight room, and locker rooms. Will also include both heating and air conditioning, so the entire building will now be all air conditioned, which will be very nice. That project will begin the minute school is let out. We hope to have that completed before the end of the summer, so we're looking forward to that one. And then the last one is, we're going to spend a little time tonight talking about the budget. As Ms. Miller indicated, we've got some really good news this week, and the governor signed a new legislation which will be awarding additional aid to our district. Not quite as much as we were hoping for. Last year, if you might recall, we received 66% of the aid we lost. The Assembly had approved legislation to also send back 66% to school districts. That was reduced to 45% when it was finally decided what the final bill would include. So it comes out to about $350,000. The difference is about $150,000. We were hoping for about $500,000. We got $350,000. Board tonight will have to decide how they would like to have those monies expended. So what we're going to need to do, and whether it starts tonight or starts at our next meeting, we really need to go through the entire budgetary process approval at the board level in the same way that we went through it last time. So the board is going to have to approve kind of a preliminary budget. We did that for the budget was most recently approved back in March. We then submit the preliminary budget to the county office. They review it, they approve it. We then conduct a public hearing, which we're going to have to do again. At the public hearing, we will adopt a new budget, and then we will submit that, and then the budget will be finalized. So we have until about mid to the end of July to complete that process. So again, whether it begins tonight or whether it begins in June, that will be something the board will have to decide. So along that same line, it's not just a matter of accepting the monies and having that reflecting as our additional revenues, but it's also identifying how that money is going to be spent. And that's where we're going to spend some time tonight in that conversation as far as what that might look like. We've talked and just as a board, and it's been a conversation that's been ongoing. Certainly consideration to be given to adding classroom teachers back into a classroom. As part of the budgetary reductions, we had to cut back to three teachers in all elementary grade levels: kindergarten, first, third and fourth. Second, which is our current first grade, currently has 3 and could remain 3. So we're not proposing at this particular time adding a teacher there, so that would be 4 classroom teachers. Something that's under consideration. There's other areas in the district in which that were impacted that we would certainly like to have some level of consideration. And there will be provisions in the conversation that would allow the board the option to potentially also increase the budget through a modification in the tax levy. That's a provision of this new legislation. It's a one-time opportunity that the board has. For those that were at the public hearing, we kind of explained that this year we only did 1% of the tax levy, mainly because last year we did 3%. and they had to we didn't realize the savings that we had initially anticipated, so we were back kind of to 1%, just a little over 1%. So there's an opportunity for the board really to extend that amount relatively high, almost up to 9.10%. But that's certainly not something the board probably is going to consider to that extent. But again, there are positions that we seriously need in order to continue to at least be able to support all the things that need to be supported in the school district. So I think that's all part of this conversation. Ready to have that now?
Sure.
All
Well,
right. We have a motion, there is a motion that we
Yep.
can certainly consider, and then we can do that under finance at that time, and then kind of get into more details, and then either the board can,
I'm amendable to that. I just want to apologize. I skipped several items on the agenda for the first time this evening,
Okay.
and it wasn't deliberate.
Yep.
But I missed and went straight to President's report. So I'm happy to have that discussion, but I just want to assure members of the public that we will have public comment, correspondence, approval of minutes.
probably best to hold out for finance, if we
Okay.
can. We have
Okay.
again, we have a motion on the agenda for the board to consider.
Okay.
It kind of leaves a couple things open. There's blanks in there for the board to make their decisions in terms of how they like to proceed. So when we get there, we can take action on the other items and then have a conversation as far as what we want to do with that particular one.
Okay,
Sounds
sounds
good.
good.
All
All
right.
right. So I apologize. That's going to bring us to our first public comment. The Pitman Public School Board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. This is the first of two public comments we will have tonight. The first public hearing is on agenda items only. This is public comment, not a dialogue between the board and the public. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and it is your opportunity to comment or ask questions. In accordance with board policy number 0167, we ask that you state your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable. To be recognized to speak, please stand to the podium located at my left and speak clearly into the microphone. Oh, there's no microphone.
I don't need a microphone.
Okay.
I hope this is the right time. I'm not here to complain. I'm Caroline Wesh. I live in Winona, but my grandson attends the elementary school, and I have a concern. I'm a retired school nurse from Washington Township for 28 years, and this past March, he suffered a fractured right ankle, and we had to drive him to school a couple days a week and drop him off at the handicap entrance. And it's a concern I have. I've always had it as a nurse, and got myself a handicap bathroom in my building, which was old, and it really was beneficial just by being an advocate of the handicap. He's now walking, but he had a cast. He was not able to put any weight on it. He was crutch walking, and Carolyn Mason was wonderful, but the handicap entrance is not the best, as most people realize. We had to pull up on Woodland with my husband's truck, and I had to get out with 2 of his classmates. They carried his backpack, and they crutched up to the corner, crutched in front of the building, then down that alleyway to the handicap entrance. And I know money's tight in schools, believe me. I'm from a small town, I hear you. But my concern is, it's not just Ben, it's other children, adults who come into the building. There's no way, I know Carolyn said that we could pull in front of the building, but that's not safe either with all the parents, as we've witnessed, trying to go down Esplanade Street to drop off the older kids. So I don't know if they could do a cutout in the front of the building. My husband had worked with facilities before and thought maybe that might be an option. And I'm not here to suggest what the plan is, but something has to be done to make it easier accessibility for children and adults to get into the elementary building. It's not acceptable to go up to the corner, down to the walkway, then down the walkway. And I know that house there with the backyard, you can't cut through that, but there's steps up to the gym. And he couldn't go up steps. He had to get on the elevator. Once he was in the building, he was fine. He had a knee walker to be on, and that worked out fine. And his classmates, his 2 friends were wonderful. Woodland was not safe to drop off because, as you know, all the parents are like driving up, dropping off their kids, and we're like stationary there. There's not even like a handicap spot to park into. And they're whipping around us, and then we're trying to leave, and that's a little feat in itself. So I'm just presenting it as a grandparent and a nurse who is always been an advocate of handicapped people coming into a school building. And I don't know, I think there's federal money you can get for handicap accessibility. I just don't think that's an ideal situation, what you have at the elementary school. I understand it's an old building, and I understand you can't make changes overnight, but it's something maybe to think about for next year moving forward. thank you for your time and thank you for all your volunteerism and work with the school district. The state budget is tough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Miles, is there any correspondence?
Yes, if I can get it here. Yeah, we have a card from Erica Davidson, just thanking everyone for their kindness on the board, and just giving her thanks. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. All right, that's going to take us to the meeting minutes. I'll now move to accept a motion for the minutes of Pitman Board of Education meetings held on the dates listed below are approved as printed and reading dispensed with. May I have a second?
Second, Papalardo.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions?
I have to abstain from May 1st because I was not in attendance.
Okay. All right, so it's going to bring us to our student representative report. And I'm just going to pop over. Ms. Zola is otherwise engaged, so you'll have a significantly less youthful voice reading it this evening.
Would you like me? I've got it.
You got it? Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Ms.
Sure.
Pavlard.
Okay, so first we're hearing from Memorial. It says May is busy at Memorial. It has begun our annual ABC countdown. The students and staff are involved in activities to represent each letter of the alphabet until the end of the year. Bubble Day, Dance Party Day, Music Day, etc. All first graders will be visiting the library to learn about the summer programs, and the library will come to Memorial to visit kindergarten. Preschool 4-year-olds will have a kindergarten move-up day, which includes eating at the cafe and reading aloud in a kindergarten classroom. Field trips are kicking off with the kindergarten going to Storybook Land, first grade is going to Johnson's Farm, and preschool will be going to Theater Works to see Charlotte's Web. A few other great events are our walk to the United Methodist Community at Pitman Manor to sing to the residents, the Butterfly Parade, and preschool is practicing on our tricycles for their upcoming triathlon in June. This year, staff participated in the New Jersey Dreams program, developing resiliency with engaging a purchase to maximize success. Through this, we received staff training for Nurtured Heart approach. Memorial Preschool Disabled will be spotlighted in an upcoming Dream Showcase as a model for other school districts who are beginning the training. The staff has done a great job embracing the training, and next year will begin implementing with continued guidance from their Dream team. And then from Pitman Junior Senior High School, it says first, juniors took their senior portraits in the auditorium 2 weeks ago to gear up for their upcoming senior year. The Pitman Music Department performed at the Pop-Up Park last Wednesday to celebrate Youth Week in town, along with students' participation in a speedball tournament. Thank you to Parks and Rec for giving students the opportunity to have some fun. AP exams started last week, and the Panthers are wishing all of their students taking them good luck. Along with that, testing for science took place for 9th and 11th graders last Wednesday and Thursday, as well as testing on Monday and Tuesday. The Student Council sponsored the Pitman Water Ice Station truck to come and give out free water ice for all students and teachers for Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you, Student Council, for the fun treat. Lastly, prom is taking place at 7 p.m. tomorrow, with promenade taking place at 5:30. Stop by to see our students on their way out for the night. And Ms. Mazzola also put a little blurb for her student rep project. She said, I've continued my work to create my student representative mental health event, which will be on June 3rd from 5 to 8 p.m. And I've reached out to 2 potential organizations that could help me make this event a success. I look forward to planning this event much more.
Great. Thank you. Okay, that's going to take us to Finance and Facility. I'll turn it over to Committee Chairman, Mr. Grossman.
Question, how do we make a motion? There's still blanks on 23.
Who's going to hold? Do everything else right. We'll do everything else right now, and then we need to discuss 23.
Okay. All right. Finance and Facilities Committee met on Wednesday, May the 8th at 4 p.m. via Zoom. In attendance were myself, Board President April Miller, Sarah Bolton, Interim Superintendent Steve Crispin, as well as our new Board Secretary Robert Miles. Meeting lasted approximately 34 minutes. We discussed agenda the items on the agenda, items 1 through 5 are consent agenda items, bills, reports, whatnot, the usual. Oh, sorry. Item 6 is pay schedule for game day workers for sporting events. Item 7 is contract for outside medical staffing. Items 9 through 19 are approvals moving forward from school year 23-24 into 24 and 25. The renewal of medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, banking institution accounts, newspaper services, which we advertise these here meetings on. And additional topics discussed were the 24-25 budget, which is added here, number 23 on the agenda. The referendum, of course, facilities use over the summer. And there is a walk-on motion not on your agenda. I'm sorry, we'll call item number 24 for the Pitman Little League donating irrigation to the Little League field on the school property. Here will be item number 24. And this Saturday is the biannual delegate assembly at Mercer County College, which I will be attending to represent our board, if anyone would like to come with. And I didn't put my email, but Pitman Elementary School Maskers is tomorrow and Friday. I can assure everyone the director has worked like he was Steven Spielberg, and this was his first production. He is extremely excited. And with that, I make a motion to approve items 1 through 24.
Let's amend it and just pull out 22. So let's do 1 through 22.
We'll pull out-
I'm sorry,
okay.
23.
1 through 22.
Yep.
23 will table, and 24 the walk-on for the donation of the Little League
Not
irrigation.
table, but we'll put it
Hold.
aside for right now. So just do the motion.
I make a
1
motion to approve items 1 through 22
And 24.
and 24
Yes.
as written.
There you go.
Do I get a second?
Second Bolton.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Mr. Miles, please call the vote.
All right. Mrs. Bolton,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell, Mr. Grossman,
Yes.
Mrs. Higby Iono,
Yes.
Mrs. Pote,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Our motion carried.
Thank you. And that will bring us to item number 23.
So just revisiting this particular conversation that I started under the superintendent's report, we have the additional funding in the amount, Mr. Miles, of $343,000. That is going to be added to our state aid. Fortunately, in the process of having this legislation approved, it was agreed that it would just be given to districts as opposed to us maybe having to apply for it, justify it, do X, Y, Z. So it's going to be added to our aid, so that's funding that we now have available to us. That's an amount that, I know we've talked about the potential teaching positions. I would ballpark teaching positions about $70,000, $280,000 are the 4 positions that we would need to add back in. Some of that balance could be used through for some of the ancillary positions that we'd also like to bring back, some of the part-time support positions that we have previously discussed. So that's an option. Not sure if we want to just talk about that part first, because that may then lead into whether or not there's a desire by the board through this opportunity we have to potentially increase our cap, to see if that's something also that the board may want to consider. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay. So let's go into the cap. So let's have that discussion. What are some of your thoughts? So now the cap is lifted to 9.9. We're currently being penalized 1%. So we tentatively approved last meeting 1%. So the discussion and recommendation is to approve 2%, which brings us closer to the total of what we anticipated the return of state aid to be. And we've discussed what the impact would be in terms of positions. So as a board, what thoughts would you like to add to this conversation?
I think it's something we need to do because we have positions that we know we need, and if we don't have the money to back those positions, we've got to do something. If we want to have the best education for our kids, we need to try and save everything that we can that is really important. Staffing is definitely an important one.
Can we talk about the tax burden that it'll put on people? So 1%, we already approved the raise, and that brings us, I think,
Sure.
$74
Let me pull up actual
on the actual.
I was going to say, how
Everything
Mr.
else.
Miles play it.
Yeah, so currently the way it is now, if everything stays the same with the local tax levy from the prior adoption, the average assessed home in Pitman which is $239,000. The yearly impact would be 74, and that's about $6 per month. That's currently where it stands.
Okay, and if we go up to 2%, what does that number go from?
Yeah, so 2% would be another 154,924. And then that would actually, for the same average assessed home, it would go to $97. So it goes from about 74 to 97. That's an $8 a month impact.
So about $2 a month increase.
Correct. Yep.
And this is a one-time opportunity like this.
Correct. So the intention is to have districts go to their municipalities to make up the loss of state aid. So we would be able to go up to the full 9.9%, but it comes from the pockets of our local taxpayers. So the state is shifting the burden of responsibility for the lost equalization aid to local taxpayers. I don't think that's something that this board has given consideration to, because we know that our municipality already funds our district in excess of our local fair share. So our community is already very generous in what they're able to provide for our schools. So despite those cuts, which have been tragic and we see the implications of them, I don't think that the response from our position as the board is to go up 9.9%.
Agreed.
No.
So do we need to, how should we move forward?
If I may, help me understand layman's terms, how 1% is $74 and 2% is $97. Where's the correlation there?
Yeah, so yeah, I guess you could think of, if it's from 0% to 1%, it goes up 74.
Right.
Why wouldn't it just do that again,
Correct.
1 to 2? It's difficult to explain, but there's other factors involved where it's not a 1-to-1 always. So, like for example, there are situations where there's municipalities or school districts that go up 2% to cap, and their impact to the local taxpayer goes down because of ratables and other factors. So we were at 1%, $74, but now for every 1%, it does go up about that amount. But that starting point, it's a little bit, I'm not explaining it well, but it's not a 1-to-1.
If I could just ask, it's 74, what was the other one? What's, if we go up, it's
Yep.
gonna be
97,
97?
97.
about $8 a month.
Because actually, it was actually a little bit, I think it was actually 1.1 is,
1.5 is what we could raise.
no, but I
Oh,
think
the
it was
loss.
1.1 is what the actual amount of the cap was in the budget that's been approved. So it's really only going even up 0.9, I think, to get to
0.99. Yeah.
0.99, so very,
It's
yes.
very close, but it
Very-
wouldn't.
very close.
Yeah, that doesn't account for the
Wow.
difference.
Wow.
All right, so then we're going to cap it at the 2, which we originally were going to do, but then the state penalizes 1.
Correct.
So we're going to go back to the 2.
That's right.
I'm on board with that.
Yeah, we're not going in excess of, we're not asking people to do something that they wouldn't have expected until this aid came, because this would have been the customary process. It's kind of what we keep in the back of our minds from a budgeting perspective when we look at annual increases, maintaining positions. We know that these cost increases have to come from somewhere. There has to be an additional revenue source, so that, it doesn't actually equal out, but the solution isn't continuing to cut at the rate we have previously. So do we need to make a separate vote for that, or do we just walk on the motion? Or, do we just amend the motion with the correct numbers?
That's right, and then we would have to vote on
Amend the
it.
motion with the right
Okay,
numbers.
so G. go
So we
ahead.
got to fill
Sure.
these in. Go ahead. Does anyone have a pre-fill?
And I think, if I could,
Sure.
just for the benefit of the audience, obviously, there's been some conversations as we've gone through this process. And just to give you a sense a little bit, what does this represent? If you talk about staffing, and certainly it's up for the board to decide, but one of the areas that we're looking to kind of bring back and to strengthen a little bit is the special education program. At our public hearing, there were some conversations about special education. We are going to be one less special education teacher at PES next year. This year at PES, we have a special ed teacher doing in-class support at each of the grade levels, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, so there's 4. And next year, we'd only have 3. So 3 servicing 4 as opposed to 4 servicing 4. Still would meet the IEP requirements. IEPs are being adjusted accordingly to ensure that we can provide the appropriate amount of coverage. It's not the ideal, but it's kind of where we are. There's been conversations about impact on the resource room setting. That is something that's still to be determined. We feel there still may be possibilities of providing that level of service, but we can't really do anything until classrooms are set, students are assigned, and we can see how we can best utilize our staff, but that's still a possibility, but it's certainly not a guarantee. So in some respects, it's not quite where it was, but relatively speaking, it's still pretty strong. Currently, we are servicing kindergarten and first grade with one teacher. We did have two there 2 years ago, but then last year, because of the reductions, we have to service that with one. It's working, so again, we think we can make that work. So special ed is an area. Part of the funding, a large part of the additional funding would go to bring back one of our child study team members who we had to reduce from the budget in order to get to the cap level that we needed to get to submit the budget to the county. This is a very important position. They're all very important positions, but the support of the team is critical. This is one of the social worker positions in which services every special ed child in the district. The team is made up of a school psychologist, social worker, and LDTC. So this would be the social worker position. Again, is involved in all IEPs, but is the case manager for the IEPs at Pitman Elementary School. If we didn't have that person, we have a way which we could manipulate the current team to provide the coverage, but of course it's not going to be at the same level because now you have less people covering more students. This individual, the responsibilities are very important in terms of supporting the students in the building. So certainly the social emotional needs of our student population for all students continues to expand. Certainly our special ed population, having this individual in the building with the skill set that this person has is very important. So that is the primary position. It would also allow us to look at some of the other support positions, but because of kind of salary and benefits, a large part of the monies that we're talking about would be going for this particular individual.
So, Mr. Grossman, if you'd like to amend that motion, and
Can we fill in the blanks?
Yes.
Are you going to fill the blanks in?
I can read off those blanks right now. Okay, so this is based on going to 2%, which would be an additional $154,924 to the tax levy on top of where we were. So that top left box under general, the new amount would be $23,300,541. I'll say it again, $23,300,541. The box below is already filled in, that's the 7.3. And then the taxes to be raised, that local tax levy for the general fund would go to $15,955,299. So $15,955,299. And then I can read off those other two numbers if you'd like as well. Okay, so the top right box would be the total across. That would be $26,926,024. So that's $26,926,024. The box below it doesn't change. And then the last box, the bottom right, would be $16,380,230. So $16,380,230. I can repeat that.
We're good.
Good.
So you need a motion to approve as amended.
And if I could, one other thing, there's a blank for the date for the public hearing. We would just do that at the June meeting, correct?
June
June
15th.
June 15th meeting. That's at the bottom there. So the public hearing right here. That'll be our public hearing. We would
So-
adopt the new budget.
June 19th, I apologize.
June 19th.
I thought the 15th was right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Grossman?
I make a motion to approve the amended item number 23 on the agenda.
And a second?
Second, Bolton.
All in favor?
Mr. Meyer?
Yep.
Wait, we have to.
Roll call.
Yeah, roll call.
Roll call. Mrs. Bolton?
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mrs. Higby-Iono?
Yes.
Mrs. Pote?
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes,
Our motion carried.
thank you. We're gonna take us to curriculum and instruction. I'm going to turn it over to our committee chairwoman, Mrs. Farrell.
Sure. The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met on Wednesday, May 8th at 4:45. In attendance were Mr. Crispin, Mr. Miles, Mrs. Moody, Mrs. Miller, and myself. We briefly discussed some of the items that we will be approving on tonight's agenda. You'll see there's a couple of groups that want to use the buildings over the summer, which will help with revenue. A new math curriculum was selected, which will be funded with our remaining ESSER funds. We talked about some of the positions we will be losing and the impact that will have. Not agenda items discussed included the search for a nurse position, the high school schedule, and our selection of the new math series. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
So are we amending these motions this evening? Are we removing?
Yes, we can there, Mr. Solicitor, correct? And we amend,
Sure.
include.
A motion to both?
Then you're gonna need to announce the amendment, then remake the
Okay,
motion.
so I have like this gone and this amended, or not, are we not amending? What's your-
If possible, I think I think everyone is comfortable knowing where the board stands, and I think we
Sure.
can make adjustments at the next meeting. The one that I think probably most importantly needs to be amended is number 27,
Right, okay,
taking Mrs. Gillen's name off of that list.
okay.
Yes. No. That one. In terms of Mrs. McGinn, we met her today. I can't absolutely guarantee that until we have a chance really to see how all the numbers play out. She understands that, so that's a work in progress.
Okay, so Mrs. Farrell, you'll amend number 27 to remove Mrs. Gillen's name.
Okay, so motion,
So,
Motion to amend number 27 to remove the name Jennifer Gillen.
okay.
Make it-
Motion, I'd like to make a motion to amend number 27 to remove Ms. Gillen's name.
okay. I have a second?
Second, Grossman.
And that's just an all
All
in
in
favor.
favor?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
So there's other teachers, obviously, that we'll be looking to bring back. I think just with the assurance of the board, knowing that that's how the money's going to be allotted, those names will be presented to you at our next meeting,
All right, and then
Make a motion.
as well as any other
Correct.
adjustments that we're making.
Great, okay,
Okay.
very good.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve items 2 through 40 as written.
Second, Papalardo?
As amended.
As amended, sorry.
That's okay.
Second.
That's why I'm here.
I'm new at this.
Yep, second.
Favorio. Okay, Mr. Miles?
All right, roll call. Mrs. Bolton,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell.
Yes.
Mr. Grossman,
Yes.
Mrs. Higbee Iono.
I need to abstain from 29, but yes to all others.
Okay, abstention noted. All right, Mrs. Pope,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
All right, motion carried.
Thank you. Communication and Policy Committee, I'll turn it over to Committee Chairwoman, Mrs. Higbee Iono.
The Communication and Policy Committee met on Monday, April 8th at 4:30 PM. In attendance were Mrs. Farrell, Mrs. Pope, myself, Mr. Crispin, and Mr. Miles. The committee paused its ongoing review of the Board of Ed policies for the month because the board was dealing with budget and other issues. Committee discussed revisions to Board Policy 1220 governing the hiring of a chief school administrator. The committee is proposing revised language that will allow some flexibility to a future board in setting the criteria for candidates in a future CSA search. We expect to be able to put the revised policy on the June agenda for our first reading. Excuse me. Item number 1 is just a bit of housekeeping. We just need to readopt the board policies and bylaws every year. And next month, the committee will resume its comprehensive review of all board policies. So with that, I move to adopt item number 1 as written.
Have a second?
Second, please.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Miles, please call the roll.
All right, Mrs. Bolton,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell.
Yes.
Mr. Grossman,
Yes.
Mrs. Higbee Iono,
Yes.
Mrs. Pope,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. So to bring us to our second public comment, please state your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. You recognize to speak, please come to the podium located to my left.
Dave Ho, 101 Colonial. Could you make an effort to explain how doubling the increase in the tax levy doesn't double the impact?
Yeah, I can do that right now, sure. I actually was looking at it. So something that I'll try to be brief here. I tend to ramble, so I'm going to get to the point. Our tax levy last year was $15.6 million. If you kept that the same, that's the tax levy this current year. If you kept it the same for next year, the tax impact would not be zero. It would be about $50 on an average assessed home. So I think the assumption is if the tax levy never changes, which wouldn't be possible, but if it stays consistent, then the tax impact on the community stays the same. But that would only be the case if all the values of the home stayed the same, if every other factor didn't change. So there's other hands that are reaching in, there's other factors at play that make one year to the next not an apples to apples comparison. So we started off, even with a zero, we started off with a tax or an impact that is positive, if that makes sense.
Or
Another thing.
negative if you're a taxpayer.
Say that again?
Or negative if you're a taxpayer.
You're exactly right. And then one other thing that's a little bit interesting about the way we do it, other school districts and municipalities do the same thing, not all, is for the 23 or 24, 25 year, some of the taxes are raised in the second half of the year, some of the taxes are raised than in 2005. So we're looking at the impact for 2024. It's like a split year. That's another factor.
I get it.
And I can show you this. I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and we can talk through it.
Bottom line, though, is that you're increasing the tax levy 2% instead of 1%.
Correct.
Last year, as I understood, you raised it 3%, which was beyond the cap, with the expectation that it would be then 1% this year. So it's not what we would expect, it's more than we would expect.
To clarify, that's not the case. We didn't raise it 3% because we understood there would be a 1% limitation. We thought we were eligible to raise it 3% due to statute that permits us to raise it for things like health benefits for employees and their increased cost. So it wasn't being raised to 3% with the understanding we would be limited to 1% this year. That's a penalty that we are facing because we didn't need the 3% to the extent that we had hoped. I shouldn't say hoped. It's a good thing. It was a savings to us, but we did not anticipate that.
Okay. The other thing is, just the last thing I want to say is that the opportunity to extend the tax levy is a beautiful euphemism for a tax increase. So just know that we're, at the same time you're reaching in for a referendum. Just FYI, use that plain language.
Mr. Ho, we are all taxpayers in this municipality and we feel that burden and we certainly respect that, but you're aware, obviously, as a former educator, that there are rising costs every year, and including personnel. And so the reality is that we have to make those adjustments in our revenue sources. And with the state decreases, that's become an increasingly more difficult challenge. So none of us enjoy sticking our hand out to our taxpayers, and we often speak to how appreciative we are of how generous our community funds our schools, because we recognize the burden that it places because we're all in that position as homeowners. Please.
I don't have a statement, I just have a question.
Yeah, so if you could just give us your first and last name for the record.
I'm Kim Bridges. I've been a teacher in Pitman Elementary School for 21 years. I teach basic skills reading. My question is there a chart, a visual for the community and the teachers to see the number of positions that were cut, how many jobs were lost, also how many people had their hours cut and benefits taken away? Because I think that kind of helps to show the community, like a visual chart. This is what we're losing in Memorial, this is what we're losing in Pitman Elementary School, just to see compared to last year. Because I believe we had a visual in the past when there were budget cuts.
Well, nothing's finalized at this point.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So that is definitely going to delay any submission of that information. That's a process we're still working through now that the state aid has been partially returned. In the past, when we were discussing those things, typically that chart was related to more concrete numbers. We're just not at that point now in the budgetary process because we've taken essentially a fairly large step back in that budgeting process and now have to rework through the numbers with that increased return aid.
Yeah, we have a few decisions we need to make here relative to how this funds are going to be used, but certainly anyone, please reach out, and I'd be more than willing to provide that information. I didn't know there was a chart before. May not be a chart. I'm not a good chart person, but at least I could at least give you a summary of what it looks like,
that's fine.
yeah.
I mean, like when we closed the buildings last year, there was, okay, when we combine the two buildings,
Yeah,
we're
I
gonna
remember
have
that.
this many elementary teachers, we're gonna have this many basic skills teachers. It just, I think it makes it real for the community, for
Yeah.
people to actually see, without mentioning people's names,
Yep,
obviously.
yep. Good.
Would anyone else like to participate in public comment? Seeing no one, is there any old business?
One for me.
New business? Okay. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Papalardo.
Can I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for June 5th, 2024. It will be in the Pitman High School auditorium. It is our recognition week.